this is Bits and Pieces, the official podcast of Component Supply. I'm Kristin.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're going to be talking about a component that was basically flying off the shelves in 2020. You might say it was the hottest item of the season.
It was the hottest item of the season, yes.
Do you know what it was?
It's toilet paper.
No, it wasn't. But that would have been a good one.
I know.
We would have made so much money if we would have decided to sell the toilet paper that we got from the Mennonite store because like Sam's was out.
I know.
Do you remember that? I remember going to lunch. We have a Mennonite store that makes these amazing sandwiches, and we went to lunch, and several of the women in the warehouse and I went to lunch. I think maybe Stephanie, did you go too? And I was like, they have toilet paper. I loaded that back in the car. But no, it was not toilet paper. It was heat shrink. That's why it was the hottest item of the season.
I get it. Hot.
Do you get it?
Yes, because of the heat.
Right. So just some history on that. Heat shrink was flying off the shelves. We would be about to sell like the last piece in a line, and thankfully like the truck would come rolling in. You said,
we definitely got. It was one of those situations where we were just more lucky than good.
Oh yeah, I would love to say, oh yes, inventory planning. We did a great job. Nope, we got super lucky and managed to maintain a really good inventory during that time, but it was pretty crazy how quickly that stuff was flying off the shelf. So a lot of factors with COVID, right? Like you have medical device industry kind of blowing up in some ways because there's this need for ventilators, or you have, the tech industry blowing up because people are moving to remote work, and so they're having to build up infrastructure. And heat shrink is used in both of those industries, as well as a lot of other industrial applications. And so it was just flying off the shelves. And so we want to talk about that because for a couple of reasons. It's still very popular. It's still a very popular item, both from a industrial application, medical device application, catheter manufacturing. And while I think a lot of people would say it's kind of a simple product line, it's actually more complicated. Particularly if you're new to the industry, if you're a new engineer, not quite sure how it works, how the ratios work, all that. So we're going to just give you a really brief overview of the heat shrink.
I'm going to talk some, so it might not be brief.
Fair. That is a fair comment that the podcast listener should be aware of for sure. Why not?
I love this product line. This is one of my favorite product lines.
This is so fascinating to me.
Why? The construction and the production of it is the manufacturing of shrink tubing is fascinating to me. It's why I don't get invited to a lot of parties, but if I ever do, this is actually what I talk about. But I love. It is exciting product for me, and I actually am intrigued by the construction and the manufacturing of the material.
Well, and because we've had this shortage, because that happened, there are a lot of other suppliers now than there have ever been. A lot of other options for custom, quick turn, heat shrink products. You've had the opportunity to visit some of these manufacturers and see what they do. I think that probably fuels some of that nerdy excitement out there.
Well, it was always there, but then I got to experience it. So
right. So really, this is, I guess I must be at the parties. I'm not. This is a hard one for me.
Well, that's why you get invited to the parties.
So, but the thing is, I think for real is, a response might be, this is really simple. Like, what is there to talk about? There is actually, quite a lot. There are a lot of implications for how the specifications interact with each other to get the result you want. I'm going to let you obviously do most of the talking and explanation. I'll just be here cheering you on.
Okay.
But I will try to think of questions maybe that customers have asked us that I can interject. So depending on how well you explain, I might not have any questions.
Yeah, you'll have questions. Okay. I'm not that good at it. The side from the engineering standpoint, we stock a line of shrink tubing, several lines, right? What we have?
Yeah, so we have, several materials. So we have the FEP, we have a PTFE, we have a polyolefin, we have pebax lines. But, our big sellers are the PTFE and the FEP. And then within those, various shrink ratios. So
Right.
like, the PTFE, you have like the 2 to 1, and like FEP of the 1.3 to 1 and 1.6
Right.
to 1, which I think those could be a little bit more confusing to people, but it'll open up once you,
Right.
I think, explain how they work together.
Well, we kind of offer these standard. What's not really talked about a lot is the custom side. So many, particularly in the catheter production side of shrink tubing, so much of that ends up being a custom product. That the standard stuff got you close, and then the reality is you needed something custom for your production. That doesn't really apply to the other industries it's used in, right? So this is a product used in marine. It's used in aerospace. It's used in the electronics industry. It's used in appliances. It's in your phone. It's in your microwave. It's all over it's in your car. It's used all over. In lots of applications and lots of industries. But for us, we typically land in the medical device. We do sell a lot into aerospace.
Yeah, but I would say, like, for the non-medical applications, the questions are not as technical. The concerns with tolerances and the exact specification for OD/ID, they have a lot more flexibility than someone who's in the medical device industry developing a catheter.
And they typically stick to standard. They're using something standard.
It's good enough.
It's good enough. You jump into the catheter production, and standard got you to a certain point, but it generally is going to jump to something that's custom. So understanding the product and how it's made and kind of those limitations when you finally do get ready to move into something custom can help engineers, I think, specify the right thing or save some troubles along the way.
So where do we start? What's the most critical spec for consideration when you're dealing with an FEP heat shrink?
So that's a loaded question because it depends on the application, right? So, but let's
my customers are asking me.
Right. So let's move. Let's just say, if you're in aerospace and your primary concern is you're using as jacketing, and you've got thermal issues to contend with in an aircraft, then wall thickness is actually pretty important. Obviously, at the end of the day, you've got something you're trying to wrap it around. So the recovered ID is kind of the base, the place to start with. If your mandrel or substrate or wiring jacket, whatever you want to call that, has a bundled ID or an outside diameter, of say 30 thousandths. You don't want to have something that has a recovered ID of 50 thousandths. That's not going to work for you.
Right.
So that's the place to start, is the recovered ID.
You got to make sure it's a tight fit.
Right. Beyond that, now it's about what's important to you. Is the wall thickness important? Is for the application. So, but recovered ID, at least is when you start looking at a chart, if you don't see something that's going to match your recovered ID, you're not looking in the right place. So that's kind of the place to start. And again, this is just all in the standard side of it. When you talk about how to, like, the custom side and start beginning to think about that, understanding how that's made to begin with is, I think, important.
Okay, so tell us about that, because I know that this is the real exciting part for you.
This is all I ever want to talk about.
I love that.
So, we use that with like a 30 thousandths ID, right?
Okay.
And so this is your recovered ID. So you've got this stuff called shrink tubing. The only thing referenced to shrink is this ratio, right? Shrink ratio. Everything else is expanded, it's recovered. So where's that coming from? They start off just making an extruded tubing with some inside diameter in a wall, so 30 thousandths in a wall. Okay. They make just this extruded tubing. They put it on these big spools. They take that spool when it's done and they pressurize the tube from the inside out. So they hook it up, they apply compressed air to it. So now you've got this huge spool and it's got a lot of material on it, and the tubing inside is now pressurized. Then they run it through a machine called, it's called an expander. This is where I think people get offended, but I'll explain it later. I'll go back and qualify it later.
Offended because?
Because I'm going to simplify it.
Oh, don't be
offended.
And
But basically, it's like an oven, and it's got, they start running the tube, and because it's pressurized and it heats it up, that tubing expands with the pressure inside it. And they've got these dies that are basically tubes, and that controls how big. So this is how you go from 1.6 to 1 or 2 to 1. So you expand it, and that tube controls it, and it goes through this. So now we've got these expanded pieces, and it goes through this expander or like an oven type thing. And then what's left is this tubing that's sitting here that's now, in 2 to 1 ratio. It's kind of like twice as big. And then when you take that, you can apply heat. It'll recover back, which is why it's called the recovered ID. So you've got your expanded ID, which is kind of how they blew it up. Now you've got your recovered ID when they apply the heat to it. And that's the process in which they manufacture. It starts out as a very controlled extruded tubing. They then kind of pressurize the tubing, run it through an expander, which is really just heat and can be pressures, things like that. And so that's how they blow it up or expand it to this expanded size. And now you're left with something that when you apply heat, it magically recovers back to its original form.
We've had a couple trainings where you've had, our sales and customer service team go onto the floor and practice with that. We've had a manufacturer come in and do a training. It is really fascinating to see how it works, particularly in the finished application.
Right. And again, I made that very simple. I want to clarify that. The operators that are doing this, it's not that simple. There's a lot that goes into it. They're very skilled at what they do, particularly when you get into some of these 2 to 1 shrink ratio. It's not just simply putting some pressure on tubing and heating it up. It is a complex and takes a skilled operator to produce those products.
Which is what makes it really impressive, I think, when you have some of these manufacturers that have become very committed to the quick turn aspect of it, because it is technical and they can still produce it so quickly. So we didn't talk to anybody before, recording this podcast. So I'm not going to mention any names, but do you remember going to a trade show and one of the organizations had these large tubes full of their samples? And people are walking around. This is, I think, their first year exhibiting.
I do remember that, yes.
Walking around with these huge tubes of
4 foot long.
Of heat shrink. And, I see it and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go say hi to them. I mean, it was great because everyone's asking each other what's in the tubes. Right. But I
don't know how they got it on a plane.
They shipped that, right? They got shipped with the booth. But it was really fun, a fun way of showing that. And it was kind of like, here, get it in your hand fast. This is how we work. We'll just get it in your hands fast. I loved that so much. It kind of reflected the spirit of component supply, and we're super proud to supply their products now.
And it does show, the fact that they are that fast shows, kind of how good they are, the skill. Because again, it's not, you've got to have the pressure just right. You've got to have the temperature just right in order, because some of these custom things, it's not 2 to 1, right? It's 1.85 to 1. They're very specific. And so depending on what they're trying to do and matching that can be a challenge. But those things, when you move to the custom, it's important to know how it's done because there's some leeway, right? That recovered ID is super critical to what you're doing. The expanded ID, you can fudge a little bit, and it's not as controllable. So you need to design around the fact that expanded ID is going to be a little bit, the tolerance there is going to be a little bit sloppy, and it's okay to allow that.
Yeah, it might come a little bit bigger even than what you.
It might come a little bit bigger, and if you don't need to hold such a tight tolerance on that. Obviously, there's some minimum, right? You got to whatever you're going to put in there's got to go in there,
right?
But the reality is you are recovering it, so it is going to be substantially bigger. That needs to be understood in the design process, because you can tighten that up so much that you've caused a lot of unnecessary cost in your design of something that really is used in the manufacturing process, because they recover this and they cut it off, throw it away. It's not something that stays on there. It's just really a tool, if you want to consider it that way.
Right, in the catheter making
and the catheter side of it,
device,
Yeah. So, but that, I do find it interesting how it's made, because we call it shrink tubing. The reality is it really is recovering to its original form, and the process to get it there is I think, fascinating.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me talk about it.
You are so welcome. So whenever you're just determining, you have a substrate or a mandrel that's a certain size, how much does the customer need to test? Can they know with certainty what size they need to buy? Like, can you know for sure, or do you have to test with it?
I'm always going to jump to the test. You can't know. You can't. You're trying to, particularly in the catheter production, because you, in essence, you know it's going to recover to a specific diameter. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times in the catheter production, you've got a mandrel, then you're sliding on like a liner, a PTFE liner. You got pebax, you've got maybe the reinforcement, and now on top of you got this shrink tubing that's doing these things. Yeah. And this is where I think, from our, we have a lot of stuff on the shelf that's just standard. That's great. It's going to get you to a certain point. But understanding, okay, now it's getting me close, but I really need this as my recovered ID.
Yeah, the indicator that a customer is like in the medical device industry versus an industrial application, electrical, something like that, is the volume, right? Like if it's a medical device company, it usually starts at a pretty small quantity, right. Or they'll be on the website and like click, like one of each size, right, to test with what works, and right, then it grows. Versus like an industrial application, usually they kind of know what they want, so it starts with a larger volume. Yes. And also, really very few questions coming from that industry versus the questions that come from the medical device industry. It's less critical, so yes, and medical device is more critical. So it is interesting that you can just see just in the buying patterns, you can see the industry that the customers are coming from.
I think we have a lot of options for catheter production, right? So in the FEP, we have lots of different sizes, fractional sizes, to be able to grab from. Those are also used in aerospace applications or even chemical processing they're used in other applications. So we have kind of a large range. I don't know that that's either been very helpful for catheter manufacturers or it's caused problems. Because really and truly, there's a couple sizes that you can kind of use, 3 sizes or so as you produce this, and then from there you really need to look and say, I don't need a 330 seconds recovered ID. What I really need is an 87. Yeah. And so 87. They need to begin to look at the custom side of it, knowing how to specify that. And in their designs, I think is important, but then also not be afraid to in essence call us and say, hey, what are my options here? Because that actually has gotten much easier, much more readily available. The quantities have come down significantly over the years, and it that process needs to move faster. Right. But understanding which specs are really important. Do I really in that application for catheter production, do I really care about the wall thickness, a recovered wall thickness? No, because I'm cutting it off and throwing it away. It's not doing anything. What I'm really concerned about is if I want a particular shrink ratio, which means I know I need to end up with an 087. What do I really need to expand that to in order to produce the best catheter? Forget the wall thickness. The shrink ratio is going to give me whatever my expanded ID is. But the reality is I know I need this. How do I go from there and design the right thing that allows us to have some flexibility? It doesn't box us into a corner or make it so expensive because we've controlled a wall thickness, we've controlled a shrink ratio, and we've controlled a minimum, expanded ID. Yeah. Those kinds of questions.
Yeah. I don't know that I have any other I can't think of anything off the top that we get asked a lot. But I will say, commitment to R&D, as far as that goes, it's one of the reasons we offer, just one stick of material. So if you just need that 48-inch, or in some sizes we have the 72-inch, you can buy just one. We don't have a minimum order requirement because we know it's going to take some testing, especially with our medical device friends.
Yes.
And so, that's available to you. We often talk about we are only going to stock components that either we fabricate or that are critical to use alongside of our other components. So, for example, we can manufacture the custom mandrel for you to use in this process. And so it makes sense for us to stock the heat shrink. We don't do a lot of fabrication of it other than sometimes people do want it already cut to a certain length.
Of course. Yeah.
But it's a pretty critical component alongside of all the other component supply offering. So those are available, but we have the online store to use as a resource. We never want that to be your final destination, because we know there's a custom option. So we've worked hard to build relationships with manufacturers that can offer these critical components to you, these custom diameters. And so you're not limited to what's on the online store. We'll work with you to quote out a special part. And again, some of these manufacturers are super committed to R&D and can turn around the products really fast for custom, and they keep the minimums reasonable.
They're pretty reasonable, yeah.
And so I think that's a gift to the R&D community. So if you have any other questions, email, chat, call, we're here. Customer service is always available. We're constantly growing in our knowledge. The more applications we see, the better we can answer future questions. So keep calling us, keep giving us opportunities to learn from you and learn about what you're doing with the product so we can answer future questions. Well, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just appreciate being able to talk about this.
I'm so glad that you were able to nerd out on heat shrink. I know that's become your personal favorite. So anyways, get in touch with us soon. And until then, go change the world.